Hey everybody, we're going to get started here in just a little bit. We're going to talk about invasive species, specifically this plant here. This is called garlic mustard. Wait for people to join us. This has a nice garlicky smell. I can smell it from here. We'll get started here in another 30 seconds or so. All right, well, we'll get started. For those who have joined, we'll record this so other people can view it later. So hi everybody, my name is Sarah Wolf. I'm joining you with Hendricks County Parks. We're talking about invasive species today. We were going to do an in-person homeschool ecology program at the park, but we can't do that today. So we're going to offer a little bit online for you to do for today, and everybody can join in, and the program is free today. So thanks for joining us. We're going to talk a little bit about invasive plants, specifically about plants, invasive plants, why they're problems, and then how to identify this one here, a little bit about its life cycle, how to remove it, dispose it, and then a little bit about the resources that I've shared in the event. So this program, or this plant here is an invasive species. So what is an invasive species actually? So there's a lot of terms that sometimes get used interchangeably. So let's break it down. This is how I define them, and I think how most park naturalists will define them. So a plant that causes problems is an invasive plant, and this is usually one that has not originated here in North America or wherever you are located. So a non-native plant is one that was not found in North America before European settlement. So there's a lot of different ones that are here. Now they don't all cause problems, so not all non-native plants cause problems. The ones that are invasive do, and these are invasive because of multiple reasons. So some of the plants produce many seeds that last in the soil for years. Other animals might produce many babies. They're survivors, and they're survivors because there are not many animals or insects or other things that eat or harm these plants or animals here in North America or Indiana, and they can just spread. So they don't play well with others. Non-native plants or animals, insects, don't play well with others. They outcompete our native plants and animals. So there are native plants that are supposed to be here that are a little aggressive. So milkweed, for example, is one of our native plants. It's supposed to be here, but it can be a little aggressive. So it can kind of spread in your yard. And it does, some farmers don't like it in their fields, but it's supposed to be here. So a native plant can be aggressive. Now, just because a plant is native doesn't always mean people always want to have it in their yard, like poison ivy. Poison ivy is a native plant. It's actually very valuable for wildlife. Lots of animals eat it. We're about the only animal that's allergic to it. So there are native plants that can be aggressive or not desired, but they're supposed to be here, and there is a place for them in our ecosystem. So non-native plants can be invasive. They can spread and take over. They don't play well with others. There are native plants that are supposed to be here that can be aggressive, but they are not problematic like some of the other ones. So invasive plants or species in general sometimes get here on purpose. Sometimes they're brought in accidentally. So we're talking mostly about garlic mustard here today. This is a plant that is found in most woods, unfortunately, here in Indiana. This was brought intentionally. This plant, it's not always very large. This was brought by European settlers. It was first recorded in the United States in the 1800s, mid-1800s, and it was brought by European settlers. There's some edibility to it. I'm not going to focus on that right now because I don't want anybody to eat something they shouldn't be from their woods, so I'm not going to focus on that. But it was brought intentionally from Europe, and I actually was fortunate enough to get to study in Austria and in Germany, and I was able to see garlic mustard growing in its native habitat in Germany, which was really cool. And it doesn't cause problems over there because there are animals, insects, other things that will eat it and keep it from spreading out of control. We don't have very many predators of garlic mustard here in Indiana or North America. So, yeah. So it was brought intentionally. Other invasive plants and animals, insects, sometimes come accidentally. So we're not going to really focus on those today. But garlic mustard is this plant here that I'm holding. I went and picked it from a cemetery near me, and I actually had some of this in my backyard too. So if you have any little wooded area, maybe like a fence line or something like that, that's a little shaded, you probably have it growing in your yard too. It's not probably going to cause too many problems in your yard, but we don't want the seeds to spread to other natural areas. So this plant looks innocent enough, right? It actually will cause problems for our native wildflowers, the spring wildflowers that come up. Our spring wildflowers that grow underneath the trees in the forest, they have to complete their life cycle in a very short amount of time before the leaves come out on the trees. And you don't want, and if their life cycle is hampered in any way, they may not be able to continue. So our garlic mustard is actually crowding it out. Garlic mustard will shade out the native spring wildflowers. It's much, much taller than most of our very early spring wildflowers, so it can shade it out. They also compete for resources, sunlight being one of them, water, space, soil nutrients. So it can make it harder for the early spring wildflowers to grow. This plant also produces some chemical warfare in its roots, so it makes it harder for other small plants to grow in the same area. So it can change the soil, like chemistry, a little bit to make it harder for those plants to grow in the same area. So it is, that's why it's a problem, because it will take over. And there are wooded areas that I've seen where it's just the whole forest floor is covered in this. Now, garlic mustard typically will grow in shady areas, although I have seen it on edges of prairies and sort of disturbed soil that is sometimes full sun. So it may be adapting to grow in more full sun. So the plant can be very small. This is kind of an average size plant. I also found a teeny tiny one that's actually flowering, getting ready to flower. And then there are larger ones, even larger than I found. So this one here is not quite 3 feet, but I've seen taller than this, and they can be even kind of shrubby looking. This one has multiple stalks coming out of the ground here. So it causes problems because it outcompetes our spring wildflowers, and it makes it harder for them to grow because of the chemical warfare. And a little bit about its life cycle here. So this is actually a 2-year plant. It's called a biennial, which means it's a 2-year plant. The first year is just these small leaves at the bottom. They look very much like violet leaves in the first year. They're even smaller than this, kind of a light green color, not dark like violet leaves. And so the first year it will have those small leaves. They're called basal rosettes. It's just the leaves at the bottom, just in a little clump. And then the second year is this plant here. So it sprouts, and then it produces flowers, And these leaves here are a little bit different shape than the basal rosette leaves. These are a little bit more pointy, a little bit more heart-shaped. The basal rosette leaves are typically a little more rounded. And then the flowers here are white, and they have 4 petals, like in the shape of a cross. There are other white flowers that are somewhat tall, coming out, maybe not quite yet, but a little bit later. And you don't want to mistake this plant for those. You don't want to be pulling those other spring wildflowers thinking it's garlic mustard. So being able to identify it is very important. So especially when it's flowering, knowing that shape of the flower is very helpful. 4 white petals is very important. So another characteristic for identification of garlic mustard is that it has kind of like garlicky smell of the leaves. That one doesn't smell too garlicky. Sometimes the earlier leaves smell very garlicky, and that's actually how it got its name. So it's in the mustard family, and the mustard family has these 4 flower petals. That's a identification characteristic of the mustard family. And then it's called garlic mustard because it smells garlicky, kind of tastes garlicky, only if you're eating it with permission and proper identification. Don't do this at home, kids, without proper parental supervision and expertise. So garlic mustard is the name, and that's why it's called that. So the seeds here are produced after the flowers have finished. So the plants have just started flowering maybe a couple of weeks ago. It's kind of early this year, sometimes it's later. So when these flowers have turned into seed pods, they'll have long seed pods that are a couple inches long, and they'll have little black dots in there that you can see once the flower or the seed pod has dried up and is light brown color. And it can produce a lot of seeds for one plant. And those seeds are viable in the soil for more than 5 years. So it's a really problem because the seeds last for so long. So if you're battling an area of garlic mustard, you're probably going to have to continue battling it for at least 5 years, if not a little longer, to get all of the new plants that are sprouting. And you want to get them before the flowers have finished because you don't want more seeds to be planted in your area. So they can take a long time. So that's a little bit about how to identify them. There's a really great identification quiz and little tutorial in the resources I shared. And it's a really good tutorial. And then you can also learn about some other invasive species in some other tutorials, and I actually learned how to identify Norway maple, which I didn't know yet. So even people like me can learn more too, which is good. So garlic mustard, the easiest way to get rid of it is to pull it by its roots. So it's very easy to pull from the roots, especially after rain, so the ground is very soft. This plant is a survivor, like I said. And the root oftentimes will make sort of a S-shaped curve right underneath the soil surface. So right here is where the soil surface is on the plant. And then you have to almost get your fingers down into the soil. You're going to get a little muddy. It's okay. You got to pull the whole thing out. If you don't get the whole entire root, it will re-sprout. And I actually found this tiny one here. This is the smallest one I've ever seen flowering. But it looks like there was another plant that maybe got weed whacked or whacked by the lawnmower, and so it re-sprouted because the roots were not pulled out of the ground. So it still had energy to be able to produce the very small flowers. They haven't flowered yet. So you got to pull it out from the ground, from the root. And then this is very important. Just pulling it out from the ground is not going to keep it from causing more problems. So one time I was working at a park area near Lafayette, and I had pulled garlic mustard, just a little handful of it. I forgot to bring a little grocery sack to put it in. So I laid it down on a gravel trail, thinking that the sun would bake it. It was in the bright open area where I laid it down, flat on the gravel, and thought, well, it'll get cooked by the sun, it'll be fine. There were flowers, but there weren't any seed pods, so I didn't think that was going to be a problem. Well, the next day I came back, and it wasn't rooted in the ground at all, but the thing, the plant had turned up towards the sun, part of it, and those flowers were going to continue producing, finish making the seeds. So you have to remove the entire plant from the area. So the easiest way to do it is just bag it up in a trash bag or a little grocery sack, remove the entire thing. You do not want to stick it in the crook of a tree just hanging there, because it will still produce seeds if it has flowers. If you do pull it after the seeds have been produced in the seed pods, it is very possible that you're going to shake those seeds out, and you don't want that to be happening. That's going to undo all of your good work. So you have to remove the entire thing. And you need to put it in the landfill, in the trash can to go to the landfill. You do not want to compost this in your compost pile. The heat, there's not enough heat produced in the compost pile. You don't even want to burn it, because you're going to just produce seeds around your burn pile. So just, this one is one to throw away. Get rid of it. So that's a little bit about garlic mustard. If you have questions about garlic mustard identification and things, I can try to answer those questions. I see there's a couple other questions here. Garlic mustard is not dangerous to humans or animals that I know of. Like I said, it's actually edible. That's why it was brought over to North America. Definitely do your own research on garlic mustard before you eat any of it. Don't do this at home, kids, without proper supervision. It's not dangerous to animals. There probably are a few animals that might nibble on it a little bit, but it's not a primary food source for any animals here in North America, and that's one reason this is a problem, because nothing eats it other than some people. There's a few bug holes on here, but not enough to cut it back. The most dangerous invasive species, I have to do a little research on that. There are some here in Indiana that can cause some problems. I don't think this one that I'm mentioning is located in west central Indiana. I'll post a link about it. It's called giant hogweed. And if you pull this plant and you're exposed to sun, you can get very, very bad burns, like third-degree burns. So it's very dangerous. So invasive plants and animals can be dangerous to people. Garlic mustard is not one of those that I know of. I've not heard of any of those. So definitely check out some of the resources I've shared in the discussion tab. There's a lot of great stuff there. Some nice videos for kids and other people just about how to pull garlic mustard, a little bit more identification about garlic mustard, why it's a problem, and then some resources on what to do if you have garlic mustard or other invasive species in your yard, which you probably do, and some great ways to control those, some recommendations on what to plant instead. So there's some really great stuff in there. How long can garlic mustard survive for? Survive like after it's been pulled, or it's a 2-year plant, so there's just the basal rosettes first, the first year, and then after it sprouts up tall and then has the flowers, it will not, this plant will not live after this. It dies after the flowers have produced the seeds. So this particular plant itself won't be alive, but its babies will. So that's the problem. So it doesn't last long like bushes and trees do. So if you have other questions, I can answer those. We do get other questions related just to our parks. McCloud Nature Park and the Vandalia Trail between Amo, Coatesville, and Putnam County line are open for solitary enjoyment on the trails. Please practice safe distancing from others. Gathering in groups is not recommended at this time. Restrooms are all closed though, so make sure you plan ahead. No restrooms are open. The Nature Center is not open. There are park maps at the front of the Nature Center in the brochure rack, or you can download your own from our website, hendrickscountyparks.org, for just in case you're not sure, there will be a map there for you. Continue following us on Facebook and our website for more fun programming and other activities, including some turtle videos and pictures, which have been popular. So If you have other questions, I can try to answer those. If not, I can take questions through Messenger or through the comments, and I can answer those later too. So hopefully that gave you a little bit more information about garlic mustard, why it's a problem, how to identify it, what to do about it. It's very easy for kids to remove it from your own yard. You do need to watch out for poison ivy, even though poison ivy doesn't have the leaves on the vines yet. It still can make you itchy. The oil is even in the stem of the plant, so you do need to watch out for that. Maybe wear some gloves when you're pulling garlic mustard. If you do pull garlic mustard in your yard, there's a virtual weed wrangle being organized, kind of like a little competition kind of thing. So check out that in the resources tab for more information and where you can share your pictures of garlic mustard that you've pulled. So, well, I hope we all see you again very soon in our parks and in our park programming. Hope you are all well and safe, and we will see you again soon.